I thought the engagement the other day was rather brilliant by Jeff Merkley, because the question isn't whether or not Donald Trump is a Russian agent, but whether a Russian agent would be more successful in working on behalf of the Russian state than Donald Trump is being. The question in itself is rather absurd. After all, one assumes that an American president, if an American president were literally working for a hostile foreign power, there would be irrefutable evidence, declassified information, intelligence, or at least a dramatic courtroom confrontation featuring damning wiretaps and treason charges. And yet here we are, years into Trump's political career, still asking, if he were a Russian asset, what exactly would he be doing differently? So breaking it down, because there's not only Jeff Merkley who was asking questions the other day. It also turned up on the Jeremy Kyle show on Talk TV. And one of Vladimir Putin's key strategic goals has been to weaken NATO, the Western alliance designed to contain Russian military aggression. Trump has repeatedly done that. He's repeatedly cast doubt on the US's commitment to NATO, threatening to withdraw and deriding its European members as freeloaders. And just last month, he suggested he'd encourage Russia to attack NATO countries if they that didn't pay up. If you were writing a spy novel about a compromised US president, this would be an obvious plot point. And during his previous presidency, when he was formally president, Trump was impeached for withholding military aid to Ukraine in an attempt to pressure Zelensky into investigating Joe Biden's son. And since leaving office, he's continued to undermine support for Ukraine's war effort. J.D. Vance, one of his key allies, the vice president, the gerbil, openly questions whether the US should help Ukraine at all. And Trump's return to the White House means an immediate drop in US support for Ukraine, another Putin win. Whether it's parroting the idea that Ukraine is a corrupt state, questioning about whether Crimea should belong to Russia, or suggesting that Putin's invasion wouldn't have happened under his watch, despite doing nothing about Crimea when Putin was formally president in 2016, I think, and Crimea had been invaded in 2014. Trump consistently pushes narratives that align with Russian interests. And Trump's famous 2018 Helsinki press conference, where he sided with Putin over US intelligence agencies on the Russian election interference, remains one of the most astonishing moments in modern American diplomacy. When asked whether he believed his own intelligence services or Putin's, Trump hesitated, then effectively took Putin's side. If you were playing a drinking game where you took a shot every time Trump praised Putin, you'd be hospitalized or paralytic before half time. And despite extensive evidence that Russia interfered in the 2016 election, Trump continually downplays that threat, calling it a hoax and trying to shut down the investigation. If a US president was secretly working for Moscow, this is exactly how they would act: deflect, deny, obstruct. Now, there are two possible answers to the question about whether or not Trump is an agent. The first is the straightforward espionage thriller version, that Trump is literally compromised. And perhaps there's a long-forgotten KGB file, or he was ensnared in a compromat sting, or a honey trap, or Russian oligarchs hold financial leverage over him through murky real estate deals. The second possibility is more banal, but no less dangerous, that Trump isn't a Russian asset, but he consistently acts in ways that benefit Russian interests out of personal and ideological convenience. This is the idiot, isn't it? Some argue that Trump's deference to Putin is just part of his broader admiration for authoritarian strongmen, whether it's Kim Jong-un, President Xi, or Hungary's Viktor Orban. Trump is instinctively drawn to leaders who wield absolute power without pesky democratic constraints. No doubt, J.D. Vance has already identified Trump as having links to the mustachioed painter from Austria who started the last war. Vladimir Putin isn't an adversary, he's a model. And others point to Trump's business history, Russian money that's propped up many of his ventures over the years. His son, Eric Trump, once bragged, "We don't rely on American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia." And Trump has long been enmeshed in a world of oligarchs and shadowy offshore finances, and his deference to Putin may simply be a case of following the money. Here's where things get even more interesting. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Trump isn't literally a recruited agent. Does that change anything? Because functionally, his behavior aligns almost perfectly with Russian strategic goals. If the President of the United States, whether knowingly or unknowing, acts to weaken NATO, to undermine Ukraine, to amplify Russian propaganda, to discredit the US intelligence agencies, to push isolationist policies that let Russia expand its influence unchecked, all of that helps Russia, doesn't it? And does it really matter then whether he has an FSB code name or a secret dossier hidden in Moscow? It doesn't matter. The practical outcome is the same. J.D. Vance, this Trump ally, this vice president, this gerbil, sometimes you think he ought to be put back in his cage, dangerous animal. He should go back in his cage and back onto his treadmill. But he's repeatedly used the phrase late Republican period to describe America, an allusion to ancient Rome in the years before Julius Caesar's dictatorship. And he's right. He and his allies don't see democracy as a stable, lasting system. Instead, they view it as a transitional phase before the rise of strongman rule. We're in the period of Sulla and Marius, and maybe even Cicero, but I don't see any Ciceros standing ready to attention. It explains a lot, and Cicero didn't have a good end. It explains a lot about their approach to government. They don't care about institutions. They don't care about checks and balances or legal norms. They're playing a different game. And literally, we've got the word populares, the populi, the populari. It's turned up again. These populists. One that ends this different game, one that ends with an autocratic America that prioritizes loyalty to a leader rather than to democratic principles. And in this new America, Vladimir Putin's style of governance is a model, not a warning. And Trump may not be a Russian agent in a cloak and dagger sense, but in many ways he's something worse, isn't he? He's the useful idiot, that's it, the useful idiot, the leader who acts in Russia's interests without needing explicit instructions, the person who muddies the waters. And the US intelligence community has long warned about leaders who unwittingly advance American objectives because of personal vanity, ignorance, or financial entanglements, and Trump checks every single one of those boxes. So whether he's an agent or just somebody who consistently benefits America's adversaries, the real question isn't whether Trump is compromised, it's whether the American system can survive another term of someone acting as if he were compromised. Because if J.D. Vance is right, and J.D. Vance is an intelligent gerbil, we're in the late Republican period, then the next phase isn't a democratic revival. It's the end of democracy altogether, and that starts with a vigorous stabbing in the back.